The galactic sovereignty had conquered 43 star systems in 2 centuries. They had glassed the industrial world of Keth Prime. They had cracked the orbital rings above Seraphor. They had marched their war fleets through the Veneth corridor without losing a single capital ship. And they had done it all under the unbroken command of Warlord Dreth. 7 feet of armored muscle, black-plated carapace, and absolute certainty that nothing in the known galaxy could make him afraid. He had never met a human before. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was kicking the dog. It happened on Meridian Station, a neutral trade port floating at the edge of Commonwealth space. Dreth had come for a negotiation, which was, in his experience, simply a war conducted with words before the actual war began. His delegation swept through the station's central market district with the casual arrogance of those who have never been told no, scattering vendors and travelers from their path, like water before a prow. The human was sitting at a cafe table near the market center fountain. His name was Jack, and he was unremarkable to look at. Medium height, dark jacket, the kind of weathered face that suggested someone who had spent years in places that weren't particularly safe. He had a coffee in one hand and a datapad in the other, and at his feet, curled on a worn blanket, was a dog. A golden retriever, to be precise. Old, graying at the muzzle, sleeping in the warmth of the station's climate systems with the deep, trusting peace of an animal that had never once doubted it was loved. Her name was Biscuit. Dreth's delegation swept past the cafe. One of his lieutenants bumped a table. Biscuit, startled from sleep, lurched upright and barked, a single sharp sound of alarm. The reflexive warning of an old dog who had once been young and protective and hadn't quite forgotten how. Dreth stopped. He turned. He looked at the dog with the expression of someone who had never in his life been barked at and did not find it acceptable. And then, slowly, deliberately, in full view of the market and his delegation and the security cameras and the 17 alien species going about their afternoon, he drew back his armored foot and kicked Biscuit hard enough to send her sliding 3 meters across the polished floor. Biscuit yelped. The market went utterly silent. Jack stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't reach for a weapon. He set down his coffee with the careful, controlled precision of a man choosing very deliberately not to move fast. And he looked at Dreth across the 10 meters of empty space between them, and something in his face changed. It wasn't rage exactly. Rage is hot and loud and visible. This was something older, something colder. The expression of a species that had been hunting things larger than itself for a very long time, and had just selected its next target. That, Jack said quietly, was a mistake. Dreth stared at him, then laughed, a grinding, percussive sound like boulders shifting. Around him, his delegation laughed as well, the comfortable laughter of those who consider themselves untouchable. Jack didn't respond. He walked to Biscuit, knelt beside her, ran his hands over her gently. She was frightened but unbroken, old bones, but sturdy. He held her for a moment, his face pressed against the top of her gray-gold head. Then he stood up, looked at Dreth one more time, turned, and walked away. No threats, no confrontation, no scene. Dreth watched him go and forgot about it within the hour. He remembered it 6 weeks later when his flagship dropped out of FTL and found a human warship waiting for him. Not a fleet. A single ship, the CSN Relentless, a Commonwealth deep strike vessel, long and dark and bristling with weapons that weren't on any of the sovereignty's intelligence reports because the Commonwealth had built them specifically for this. A communication request came through. Dreth accepted it with amusement. Jack's face appeared on the screen. He was wearing a military uniform now, and Dreth could see insignia that his translation systems identified as Special Operations Commander, Commonwealth Armed Forces. Behind Jack, a bridge crew moved with quiet efficiency. Warlord Dreth, Jack said, I gave you 6 weeks to issue a formal apology, pay reparations to the Meridian Station Humane Fund, and withdraw your advance fleets from the Corward Passage. You did none of those things. Dreth leaned forward in his command throne. I am going to enjoy this, little creature. I will burn your ship to dust, and I'm not calling to negotiate, Jack said. I'm calling because I was raised to give warning before I acted. Consider this your warning. The transmission ended. Dreth opened his mouth to order his weapons to fire. He didn't get the chance. What followed lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes in which the Commonwealth's classified deep strike doctrine, refined over decades of fighting things larger and better armed than itself, was applied in full to the sovereignty's flagship and its 3 escort vessels. The Relentless didn't fight like a sovereignty warship. It didn't stand and exchange fire in the dignified, symmetrical manner that Dreth's tacticians had spent centuries perfecting. It moved, constantly, unpredictably, firing from angles that shouldn't have been geometrically possible, withdrawing before counter-battery systems could lock, reappearing somewhere that made no tactical sense, and firing again. The Sovereignty fired approximately 312 shots. They hit nothing. The Relentless fired 41 precision strikes. They hit everything. When the flagship's main propulsion array went dark and its weapons systems fell silent, disabled, not destroyed, with a precision that somehow felt more contemptuous than destruction would have, another communication request came through. "Jack again. Your crew is alive," he said. "Your ship can be repaired. I'm sending over a medical team because some of your people got hurt in the firefight, and that's not their fault." He paused. "Now, about that apology. Word travels fast in the galactic community. What travels faster is the story of a 7-foot warlord sitting in his disabled flagship, surrounded by a single human warship and a medical team that was, inexplicably, also treating his wounded crew, while a Commonwealth commander waited with infinite patience for a formal apology on behalf of an elderly golden retriever. By the time the Sovereignty's High Council learned what had happened, they had already begun receiving messages from trading partners, from neutral systems, from species who had watched humanity for decades with cautious curiosity. "Don't make it worse," the messages said. "Just apologize." The High Council sent a delegation to Meridian Station 4 days later. Senior officials in formal ceremonial dress, representing the full weight of an empire that had conquered 43 star systems. They found Jack at the same cafe table. Biscuit was on her blanket again, tail wagging slowly, accepting ear scratches from the cafe's owner, who had taken a deep personal interest in her well-being since the incident. Beside Jack sat Sarah, his colleague, co-commander of the Relentless operation, and the person who had actually planned the 11-minute engagement while Jack had personally piloted the ship. She had a coffee and a mildly amused expression and said nothing at all, because in her experience Jack handled the diplomatic portions of their work better than she did. The lead sovereignty delegate, a gray-cloaked counselor named Ven, who had negotiated the surrender of 3 planetary governments in his career, stopped in front of their table and cleared his throat. "Commander Jack," he said, with careful dignity. "The sovereignty extends its formal." "Her name is Biscuit," Jack said. Ven blinked. Pardon. The apology should be addressed to Biscuit. She's the injured party." A long silence. Sarah raised her coffee cup to hide her expression. Ven looked at the dog. The dog looked at Ven with the uncomplicated, forgiving goodwill of a golden retriever who had already forgotten the whole incident and was primarily interested in whether this new person had treats. "The sovereignty of the Galactic Imperium," Ven said, with the full gravity of his office, "extends its formal and unconditional apology to Biscuit." The dog's tail wagged. "She accepts," Jack said. "Now, the withdrawal from the Coreward Passage. Let's talk terms." Later, much later, after the negotiations were concluded and the Sovereignty's advanced fleets had pulled back 30 light-years and a very substantial donation had been made to the Meridian Station Animal Shelter, a junior Sovereignty diplomat asked Counselor Ven a question that had been bothering him since the cafe. "Why?" the young diplomat asked. "Why does a single dog matter so much to them? Why would a species go to war over?" "Because they can," Ven said quietly. "That is what you are not understanding. They are not a species constrained by what is worth fighting over. They are a species that fights for what they love. There is no calculation. There is no strategic threshold." He was quiet for a moment, watching the stars outside the viewport. "When you study human history, you will find that they have started wars over principles, over pride, over borders drawn on paper, over words spoken and taken as insult." He paused. "And yes, over dogs." The young diplomat considered this. "Then how do you negotiate with them?" "Carefully," Vince said, "and never kick the dog." Biscuit lived another 3 years, comfortable and beloved, unaware of her role in galactic diplomacy. Jack brought her to every station, every negotiation, every meeting where he was required to represent humanity's interests to the wider galaxy. She was, without question, the most effective diplomatic deterrent in Commonwealth history. Sarah had a plaque made. It hung in the relentless wardroom, small and brass, and to the point. In honor of Biscuit, who started nothing, who ended everything. Good girl.